They say your gut knows before your brain catches up. Mine had been churning for days before I admitted to myself that something was off. My name is Elijah. I'm 32, a high school art teacher living in Charleston, South Carolina. The first was supposed to be married last month. Everything was ready. The venue was booked, my suit tailored, the RSVP list finalized. We had garden lights ordered, playlists made, and little personalized table cards that took me 3 evenings to design. I thought Daniela and I were solid. Not perfect, nobody is. But we had built a life, a rhythm. She made me laugh, brought me chamomile tea when I had migraines, and talked about adopting a dog after the honeymoon. We had been together for nearly 4 years. Her parents? Different story. Susan and Raymond, they always struck me as the type of people who'd offer you a drink while judging your handshake. Always polished. Always vaguely disappointed in me. I wasn't a surgeon or a lawyer or the son of someone with a boat. I was just me. And I figured, eventually, they'd accept that. They didn't. A week before the wedding, Daniela told me her parents had planned a quick family trip to San Diego. One last getaway, she said, before everything changes. She laughed. I didn't. I found the timing off. But I didn't want to make it a thing. She seemed excited. And trust? That's what love is built on, right? So I helped her pack. Watched her blow me a kiss from the Uber. Didn't know it would be the last one. 3 days later, my phone buzzed during lunch break. Carlos, my oldest friend from college, now working at a bar in San Diego, texted me. Bro, weird question. Isn't your fiance here on vacation? Yeah. She's with her parents and some other guy, right? Like definitely not a cousin. My stomach sank. Carlos worked at an upscale rooftop spot downtown. He described the scene. Daniela, her parents, and a guy, young, sharply dressed, clearly not just passing through. They're treating him like royalty, he added. And she's not exactly keeping distance. I felt something sharp twist in my chest. But instead of crying, I went cold. That night, I made some calls. By Sunday morning, I had hired a private investigator in San Diego. I didn't give excuses. I just wired the deposit and said, follow them, document everything. By Monday afternoon, I had the first batch of photos. By Tuesday, video clips. By Wednesday, a full report. Rooftop dinners, poolside drinks, shopping, lounging, whispering, laughing, Daniela, her parents, and the guy, Marcus. He wasn't a family friend. He wasn't a coincidence. He was the audition. And I was the obstacle. Let me know when you're ready for part 2. The folder on the table, where Elijah calmly flips the entire situation on its head the moment Daniela comes home and makes sure her family watches it happen. Daniela came back late Sunday night. She texted me something short, home, tired. Can we talk tomorrow? I didn't answer. Instead, I brewed her favorite dark roast, set out 2 mugs, and placed the folder, plain, manila, unassuming, on the coffee table, like a loaded weapon. When she showed up the next morning, she looked worn from the flight, but tried to smile like nothing had shifted. Hey, she said, dropping her purse. Coffee smells amazing. I smiled. Not wide. Not angry. Just quiet. She sat down on the couch. I handed her a mug. So, she said, wrapping her hands around the cup, San Diego was interesting. I nodded. I bet it was. Then she said it. I think we should take a break. She didn't look at me when she said it. Her eyes stayed fixed on the steam rising from her coffee like she was afraid of seeing her own reflection in my face. I didn't flinch, just reached down and slid the folder toward her. That's funny, I said, because I just got some information about that trip. She blinked. What? I didn't answer. She opened the folder. At first, confusion, then stillness. I watched her fingers tense on the edges of the photos. Watched her eyes dart from print to print, the rooftop dinner, the shared laugh by the pool, the clip of Susan and Marcus clinking glasses at a wine bar while Daniela looked on, her breath caught. And that's when the door opened, like they owned the place. Susan stepped in first, holding a binder, her infamous wedding planner. Raymond followed, phone glued to his ear. Hope we're not too early, Susan said without looking up. We've got a lot to go over. She stopped cold when she saw Daniela, saw the folder, saw me watching. Raymond glanced over, paused his call. The room fell into silence. Daniela was still flipping through the photos like maybe she could edit the story if she stared long enough. She couldn't. Finally, she looked up, voice cracking slightly. What is this? But she wasn't looking at me. She was staring straight at her parents. Raymond looked away. Susan tried to smile. Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. Daniela held up one of the photos. You said Marcus was just a friend of the family. He is, Susan said. And we thought maybe you should have options. I could feel something shift in Daniela then. Like reality finally registered that this wasn't just about a casual dinner or a misunderstood hug. It was a setup. You brought someone to replace Elijah, she whispered. Raymond finally spoke. Let's not make a scene. My laugh, small and sharp, cut through the air. Oh, we're well past scenes, I said, standing. This isn't theater. This is betrayal. Daniela looked at me, tears pooling behind her eyes. Elijah. I didn't stop it either, I said. Susan sat down like she was preparing to negotiate a boardroom takeover. You're overreacting. Nothing even happened. Not physically, maybe, I replied. But emotionally? You opened the door and rolled out a red carpet. I turned to Daniela. You didn't say no. You didn't come home early. You let it happen. She tried again. It wasn't like that. What was it like then? I asked, not shouting, just asking plainly. A test drive? See if Marcus fit the mold better? Raymond crossed his arms. We were thinking long term. We didn't want you tied down if there were better options. And that was it. That was when I realized I was never the son-in-law. I was the placeholder. I looked back at Daniela. She said nothing, did nothing. And that, too, was enough. I picked up the folder and set it down in front of her one last time. You and your family can decide what to do next, I said, walking toward the door. But I'm done. Her voice followed me, barely above a whisper. Elijah, wait, but I didn't, because silence had said enough. I didn't sleep much that night. Not out of grief, not even anger, just movement. My thoughts pacing like caged animals. I sat at my desk until dawn, reading the report from the investigator, staring at the stills and timestamps, the receipts. I had proof of everything. The dinners, the rooms, the flight adjustments, the surveillance shots of Marcus, casually resting his hand on Daniela's lower back as her parents walked proudly ahead. I kept coming back to one moment. A short video clip, grainy audio, but clear enough. Susan, at a rooftop bar, leaning close to Marcus and saying, once this little wedding blows over, you and Daniela will have all of the time in the world. It echoed in my ears like a curse. At 6:03 a.m., I picked up my phone and started making calls. By 9, I had a plan. The wedding venue, a riverside space just outside Charleston, was already prepped. We'd booked it 6 months earlier, and setup had already begun. Twinkle lights were strung across trees. White chairs lined the lawn like soldiers waiting for orders. Florists were due to arrive by Friday, so I asked to keep the space for one more day. Just a final walkthrough, I told the venue manager. She didn't question it. By noon, I'd texted Daniela, her parents, and Marcus. Group message. One line. We need to meet at the venue. Urgent. I knew they'd come. Susan thrived on control. Raymond hated unanswered questions. Daniela, for all her flaws, wasn't a coward. And Marcus? Marcus liked the spotlight. They arrived separately, but within 20 minutes of each other. Raymond in a pressed navy blazer, Susan in her white summer heels, Daniela in something black and understated, almost apologetic. Marcus was last. Tan, flashy sunglasses perched on his head like a trophy. The moment he walked in, he grinned. Didn't realize this was a full table read, he joked, surveying the reception layout. Where's the champagne? I didn't answer. Instead, I stood at the front of the room, behind a small table where the DJ booth was supposed to be. My laptop sat open. Cables ran to the venue's projector, which I'd connected myself an hour earlier. No one sat yet. Just awkward glances and shifting weight. This won't take long, I said. Then I clicked. The screen behind me lit up with a slideshow. No music, just images. Photo after photo. Marcus and Daniela sipping cocktails. Susan whispering to Marcus across a linen-covered table. Raymond smiling in the background of a hotel lobby shot, carrying a bag that wasn't his. No one spoke. Then the final slide held for just a few seconds. Susan and Marcus seated side by side, clinking wine glasses, her hand on his wrist. I closed the presentation window, then hit play on the video file. It was shaky, a phone recording, shot discreetly from behind a row of bottles at the rooftop bar. But the audio was clear enough. Susan's voice. Once this little wedding blows over, you and Daniela will have all the time in the world. Silence. I didn't add commentary, didn't need to. The walls did the talking. The tension did the rest. Finally, Susan exhaled. You're really doing this? Doing what? I asked. Showing you what you already did? Raymond stepped forward. This is private, Elijah. This isn't how adults solve things. I gave him a small, tired smile. You hired a man to befriend your daughter a week before her wedding. Let's not pretend etiquette is the hill you want to die on. Marcus chuckled audibly. I mean, you can't blame them, right? They just wanted someone who matched the lifestyle. He said it like it was obvious, like it was normal. I looked to Daniela, expecting her to protest. She didn't. She just looked broken, small, like someone who'd wandered into a burning building and realized too late that she'd helped light the match. I didn't know they said that to him, she muttered. I tilted my head. But you didn't stop it either. Susan suddenly snapped. This is ridiculous. Nothing happened. You're just trying to ruin our family's reputation out of spite. Spite? I repeated. I've said 5 sentences. You're the one who paid someone to seduce your daughter. Marcus smirked. For what it's worth, I didn't mind. That was the last thing he said before I stepped forward. Not with fists. With my phone, I tapped it and turned the screen. Instagram open. Caption typed. When your future in-laws fly someone across the country to replace you, don't cancel the venue. Use it. The post was ready. Image cued, the slideshow's final frame. Don't, Susan said, voice low and warning. Already did, I replied and hit share. It was over in minutes. Raymond cursed under his breath. Marcus muttered something about lawyers. Susan walked out first, muttering, This is harassment. Daniela lingered. Why? She asked softly. Why post it? Because they planned everything in secret, I said. And secrets are loud when they're dragged into daylight. She nodded once and walked away. I stayed behind. Not because I was savoring anything, just because for the first time in weeks, the room felt mine. Empty, honest, and quiet. By the time I got home, the post had already started to spread. It wasn't viral by any means. I don't have that kind of reach. But within a few hours, it had legs. My friends saw it. Former colleagues. Even one of my old students messaged me, Mr. Elijah, I saw your story. Damn. I hope you're okay. I was. More okay than I'd been in weeks. What surprised me was how quiet it got after the noise. No phone calls from Daniela, no threats from Susan or Raymond, not even a DM from Marcus, who I assumed would at least try to gaslight me into taking the post down. Just silence. That's the funny thing about people who like to control the narrative. They don't know what to do when the script's already out there, and they're not holding the pen. The next day, I got a call from Carlos. He was laughing. Man, you're trending in a Facebook group for Charleston event planners. Word's out. What's the word? I asked. That someone turned their wedding into a mic drop. Also, apparently Marcus is still in San Diego and very confused about why his Instagram following dropped overnight. I cracked a smile. Carlos continued. Also, Susan tried to play cleanup at some charity event last night, told everyone it was a mutual parting of ways. Then one of the guests pulled up your slideshow on their phone. I sat down at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, and let that land. They weren't just exposed, they were unraveling. I didn't feel vindictive, but I did feel seen, and that was new. By the weekend, the wedding date rolled around. I woke up that morning in a bed I'd made myself, sunlight spilling across my hardwood floors. It was supposed to be our big day. The beginning of forever. Instead, it was quiet, peaceful, unburdened. I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of champagne I'd been saving for post-honeymoon, and popped it at 9:42 a.m. Not because I was celebrating spite, because I was alive. I was me. Again, later that day I texted Carlos and my best friend Dev. Still want to get dressed up and drink too much? I've got an empty venue, a sound system, and a cake that's already paid for. They were at my door in 20 minutes. By nightfall, my non-wedding had turned into a full-blown freedom party. Champagne flowed. The playlist Daniela and I had painstakingly curated months earlier blasted from the venue speakers. Only this time, I danced to it without feeling like a background character in someone else's fantasy. We laughed. We toasted. Someone, Dev, I think, smashed a piece of the wedding cake directly onto a plastic plate with his forehead. It was absurd. It was glorious. And it was mine. Somewhere around 11 p.m., I stepped outside onto the venue's lawn. The river shimmered in the distance. The fairy lights cast a warm glow on the grass. My shoes were off. My tie was hanging loosely around my neck. Dev came up behind me. "You good?" he asked, handing me a beer. I took it, nodded. "Yeah, actually, I am." He gave me a look. That was some real warlord energy, by the way. The whole projector situation? Ruthless. I chuckled. Honestly, I didn't even plan that part. I just couldn't listen to them pretend it was fine. And Daniela? Still nothing. Dev nodded slowly. "Think she'll come around?" I took a sip of beer and looked out at the water. I hope not. The next day, I got one last message from Daniela. No long paragraph. No apology. Just, I didn't know how bad it was until I saw your face in that room. I'm sorry. I let them write the story. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I locked my phone. Didn't reply. Because I wasn't in her story anymore. I was writing my own. Word got around faster than I expected. Vendors started dropping Susan and Raymond as clients. Marcus deleted his social media for 2 weeks and resurfaced with a new account that had half as many followers. Carlos told me Madison, a bridesmaid I barely knew, had been approached by a small blog to give the inside scoop, which she declined with a sharp, "It's not my story to tell." And the funniest part? That folder, the one I slid across the table to Daniela, it was never the full report. I still had documents, receipts. A second video, I never needed to use them because the truth was enough. And I'd already said all I needed to say out loud. And on my own terms, there's a photo on my wall now. It's not a wedding picture. It's me, standing alone in the middle of the empty venue lawn, barefoot, holding a glass of champagne and laughing at something Carlos shouted off camera. It was taken on the day I didn't get married. And it's my favorite photo. Because that day didn't end with a ceremony. It ended with clarity. You learn a lot about people when they think they've won. Susan thought she'd engineered a victory. Raymond assumed their wealth could buffer every scheme. Marcus believed charm could buy him a bride. Even Daniela, whether by fear, naivety, or habit, allowed herself to believe that going along quietly was better than standing up and walking away. But here's the thing, no one ever tells you about love. If it demands silence, it isn't love. If it asks you to disappear piece by piece until you're a version of yourself that makes everyone else comfortable, it's not partnership, it's performance. I performed for too long, and I was good at it. The polite teacher, the agreeable future son-in-law, the one who never raised his voice at the dinner table, even when Susan said, "Oh, you teach art? That's cute." So like, coloring with kids? The one who laughed awkwardly when Raymond bragged about Marcus and said, "Now that's a young man with potential. I didn't rock the boat. I just slowly drowned beneath it until San Diego, until the folder, until I finally realized if you're not invited to the table, sometimes you have to build your own and set the chairs yourself." In the weeks after the non-wedding, life slowed down in a way I didn't expect. The decorations were packed away. The refund requests were sent. Some deposits returned. Most didn't. But oddly, I didn't care. The money I lost wasn't even close to what I gained. Because peace is priceless. And silence, real silence, not the kind that hangs like judgment in a room, but the kind that lets you breathe, that's rare. I'd forgotten how much of my life I had adapted to keep other people comfortable. The clothes I wore to their fundraisers, the books I left out on coffee tables, the way I bit my tongue when Daniela laughed along with her mother as Susan corrected me on wine pairings. God, the number of times I smiled just to diffuse tension, it exhausts me now just remembering it. I'm not angry anymore. I'm awake. Sometimes people ask if I miss her, not directly. Most of my friends are too kind for that. But the question sneaks in sideways. Do you think she ever really loved you? Would you have gone through with it? If San Diego never happened, do you think she regrets it? My answer's, I don't know. Maybe. I hope so, but that's not my weight to carry. I'm not in touch with Daniela, not because I hate her, but because you can't build a future on a foundation that was already hollowed out, even if you only noticed the cracks later. As for her parents, I've heard they've backed out of a few social circles, the brunch groups, The charity events. Apparently, people stopped returning their calls. And Marcus? Carlos said he was spotted in a different rooftop bar last month, trying to impress a waitress with stories about a wedding that was never meant to happen. Typical. You can't manufacture love with a suit and a smirk. Eventually, the act gets old. As for me, I started painting again. Not the polished, lesson plan kind I taught in classrooms. Real painting. Messy, chaotic, honest stuff. Large canvases. Raw color, nothing planned. I moved into a new apartment with taller ceilings and more sunlight. I got a cat. Her name's Pepper. She ignores me unless I'm eating cereal, and I love her for that. I took a trip to Portland just because I'd never been. Sat by the water. Didn't check my phone. Didn't explain myself to anyone. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an apology for being exactly who I was. The day I didn't marry Daniela was supposed to be the start of a new life. And it was just not in the way anyone expected. It didn't come with matching rings or photos under a rose arch or cake slices wrapped in lace. It came with truth. It came with walking away. It came with refusing to be erased, one compromise at a time. If you're reading this because you're in a relationship that feels like a constant adjustment, if you find yourself shrinking to fit a mold someone else carved without asking, I'll say this: don't wait for the final betrayal. You don't need a slideshow or a scene or a folder full of receipts. You only need the realization that being tolerated is not the same thing as being loved. Walk away. Build your table. Hang your own lights. Invite only those who see you clearly. And if you ever end up barefoot on a lawn, glass of champagne in hand, laughing into the night on what was supposed to be your wedding day, smile. You're free.